Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We are the Varsity Voices, where we bring you information on high school sports. We've got a particular emphasis on the Chicago Catholic League with some of our episodes. And today, in this episode, we're going to try something new a bit. We're going to do our quick hits episode, Dan.
All right.
And it's going to be, we're going to cover 6 topics, which are of high importance, not only to high school sports, but to the Chicago Catholic League as well. We're going to limit ourselves, Dan. That's hard for you and me to do.
We like to hear ourselves talk.
We like to talk. Yep. We're going to limit ourselves to 4 minutes per topic. So if you happen to go over, and this is just in regards to you, because I know you're the one who usually goes over and over and over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm going to hit something that's going to make you stop. Something like, let's see, this.
Blah, 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 blah.
How's that sound? Is that good? Will that work?
That'll work.
Yeah, that'll work. But
it's perfect.
It is. I think it'll be enlightening. And I think we're going to talk about some things that people really want to hear about. But before we get into that, Dan, last week we did our episode on, we called it our kind of futures episode, where we were talking about some of the wide receivers
right
in the Chicago Catholic League and who we should be on the lookout for. And, in the upcoming year or years, as far as who might make an impact. And, we had a lot of information. We had Jenny Zerwanka on from Deep Dish Football.
Yeah, she was great.
Yep, she brought a lot of good information too. But, we weren't able to cover everybody, unfortunately. Either we didn't have the information or, it came in afterwards. So,
yep.
We want to make sure that we don't forget anybody. And I'm sure we're still forgetting some people, Dan.
Oh,
so, yeah. So I'm going to tell our listeners, if we forgot somebody, reach out to us, and we're happy to talk about them, because we want to know about the players as well. But there's a couple that you've got that you talked to one of the new coaches within the Chicago Catholic League, gave you some information, as well as some others that maybe we forgot to talk about. So why don't you go ahead and do that, Dan?
Yeah, Joe, we're likely going to be talking about these guys next fall. So it's good to have their names early on, guys who are going to make an impact in the conference, in the games. They're going to be names that we're saying every week. So I want to make sure we get them. And so the information, trickles in. Obviously, we'd like to get it all right away. And we're going to do futures episodes on every position, not just wide receivers. We're going to do this. So if our listeners are out there, hit us up on social media and give us some information about who's doing what players we should be talking about for our futures episodes. So, Joe, I had some information from Notre Dame. So just correspondence with Coach Safranza. And
new coach.
We'll be touching on tonight. So,
all right.
So he let me know about a few guys, a couple current juniors and a sophomore. So they'll be contributors next year. The first one is Nick Miro. So he's actually a sophomore. So he started as a sophomore. So definitely someone we should have on our radar. He's a really hard worker. He's got big time potential. He's a big kid, 6'1". A guy that watch a little film. He's a great route runner. That's his strong suit, and he's got the ability to compete for the football, which I think is a big deal for wide receivers.
Yeah.
So Nick Miro, Max Santana. He's a junior, so he'll be a senior this year. So ready to step up and probably in line for a breakout year. We'll see who's going to get him the football, but he's in line for a really good year. And then they've got a slot receiver, Joe Dylan Gallagher, who is kind of, he's a two-way player. So he's someone that we may talk about again on defense, and he's a returner. So I always like to know those guys, especially receivers that play and help on special teams.
Right.
Really good punt returner. He's a kind of do-it-all guy. He'll run some wildcat at times. So Dylan Gallagher is another guy that I really wanted to mention. And then one I forgot to mention from Bennett. Got some time this year. We know John too from coaching him as a freshman, John Erickson.
Right.
So
yeah.
he
very
came
talented.
Very talented.
Yep.
He's another guy I would call like a great route runner, and he's got a really good feel for the game.
And he's sneaky fast.
Sneaky fast.
Yep.
He can make moves. He works well in tight spaces. Really good hands. Great competitor. Potential for a two-way guy as well. So John Erickson at Bennett is another guy I wanted to mention. And then finally, a couple from Nazareth as well. And the first one is Ben Lukes. So I know he got some time, and is, these guys are gonna join a really established wide receiving core with Sistone and Trenton Walker. So it was Ben Lukes, and the other one was Johnny Cologne. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Johnny Cologne. So guys whose names we will hear. It'd be super interesting to hear about the quarterbacks and who's going to get these guys a football. We know that a lot of these programs graduated big time quarterbacks, but we also know the quarterback position is just loaded, and it seems to be the up and coming position where every year the state of Illinois and the Chicago Catholic League have great players coming up. So
yeah,
wanted to make sure we mentioned those guys and didn't forget about them in our wide receiver futures outlook.
All right, great. Yeah, so we'll keep an eye on all of them, Dan, just like we do with all the players in the Chicago Catholic League. But anytime you've got some guys who, especially the coaches call out a bit, they're relying on them, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That'll be big. And like you said, we got a big turnover in the quarterback position next year in the Chicago Catholic League, don't we?
Yeah, we do. We've got some young ones that are great names, and had great seasons as softs. So that'll be. It felt like it was either sophomores or seniors. Now I know there's some juniors that are coming back, Armbruster from Rita and some others, but yeah, there's the quarterback futures episode will be very interesting.
Yeah. And, that may be, we're thinking about doing that maybe next week, Dan, in our episode next week, or maybe the one after, but it's coming up. So listeners, you want to hear about it, some of the up-and-coming quarterbacks and some of the returning quarterbacks for next year, make sure you tune in next week to our episode. So, but we wanted to go over, Dan, our six topics tonight for our quick hits.
Let it rip
episode, right? So let's let it rip. And you've got 4 minutes. That's it. Oh, no, we've got 4 minutes.
Oh, I was going to say, so I've got 4. I might have to stretch a little bit here.
No, you've got 2. I've got 2. And we're going to try and stick to it. But
so your sound effect, is that going to be after your 2 minutes or our total 4 minutes? I don't want you taking all my time.
It'll be after the total 4 minutes. Or do you want me to do it to, do you want to limit each of us to the 2?
No, because I might have 1 minute on some.
Yeah, and I'll be cognizant of a 2-minute window for myself and deadline. Right. Okay. Right.
Yep. Yeah. Do you have it on your phone?
No, but I can see the countdown on the timer on our screens. So can you see that?
Hold on.
Look at the bottom. Right now we're at the 9:22 mark. Do you see that? No. All right. I'll just let you know. All right. I'll give you one of these.
Blah, 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 blah.
Okay.
All right. Yep.
All right, good. So let's go with our first topic, Dan. And this is the new Chicago Catholic League coaches. And you are on the clock. Tell me what you think about the new coaches, Dan.
All right, here we go. So I mentioned Notre Dame. Dan DeFran's a longtime assistant. And like Mike Hennessy before him, he's very well respected already. He's an alum, so we know that pattern is prevalent in the Chicago Catholic League. I'm interested to see what changes Coach DeFranza does on the offense, because he's been defensive coordinator for a long time. So I think that will be what's most interesting to watch. Robbie Gould, obviously great name at St. Viator. Obviously great name recognition. He's been around a lot of great minds in the NFL. He's prepared. Is he prepared for the rough and tumble schedule, and what it takes to build a program in the Catholic League and to help young people decide, to attend St. Viator? Does he see St. Viator as a long-term destination? And, so that's some of the interesting things I'd like to know about Coach Gould. Coach Zibikowski at St. Pat's. At first glance, Joe, I think this might be a great fit for St. Pat's.
Okay,
He's
good.
been at the college level as a coach, so he knows about the admission aspect involved with a private school. Known as an intense and hard-edged player, so I can imagine he'll bring that to the Shamrocks as a coach. His name recognition is outstanding in the area, and it's outstanding with the right age group. So I anticipate there's a lot of parents who know who Tom Zibikowski is from playing days and would be excited to have their sons play in the program. Pat Swanson at St. Lawrence, he's the name that doesn't jump out and to the front of the page like Zibikowski or Gould, but seems like the product of an extensive search. He understands the Southside mentality, played at Marian Catholic, coached at Mount Carmel, has Jordan Lynch, Dave Matteo, and his dad, Tim, all as mentors for which he can build a foundation. He's been on the defensive side of the ball, so it'll be interesting to me to see. St. Lawrence has run a few different offenses in the past 7-8 years, so I'm looking to see what they do offensively. Their lower levels have been strong, so I'm guessing they're going to have some quick success in the division. And last, Joe, I guess we have to talk about Leo. I know they might have Jim Prunty is who Jenny mentioned last week. I don't know if that's confirmed or not.
I'm not sure. I haven't seen whether that's confirmed. I know they've hired him, and his title right now is Vice President of Athletics, I believe. But I haven't seen him as a head coach.
But an administrative role might be what they need. Just kind of keep things going along. It'd be interesting to see what he does with the X's and O's. He's coached a lot on the high school level, had a lot of success, whether it's basketball or other sports. And we know Leo presents maybe the biggest challenge in the conference. It's they're in the Red Division Conference, which is fine.
I'm going to have to give you the horn. I'm sorry. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
That wasn't 4 minutes.
No, that's 3 minutes, but I'm not going to be able to talk.
All right, go for
it. No, finish up with Leo.
I was just going to say the crossover games are what are killers for them today. So hoping that real strong lower levels and great admissions in recent years help whoever the new coach is to be a little more successful.
Okay. All right, good.
3 minutes. Well, man, that went fast.
Yeah, you can talk. You got it. You got the gift of gab. I'm telling you.
Blah, blah, blah.
But I kind of took a different approach to this, Dan, and it was, looking at the new Chicago Catholic League coaches, but also looking at some of the ones who are there already and looking at do you think there's a bit of a trend of hiring some more high profile coaches, right? Like ex-pros like Robbie Gould. You got Zibikowski, you've got McKee already at Carmel, you've got Jordan Lynch at Mount Carmel, and then I'm wondering if that's going to be a trend that continues in the Chicago Catholic League as we go forward. I think it will be. I think these jobs are becoming more high profile. I think the schools are looking for someone a little more high profile as well. To maybe attract as many players as they can, help with the development, all of those types of things. So, from my standpoint, I think those are good hires. Obviously we're going to wait and see how they do over the course of the next couple of years. But I think this is something that's probably going to continue.
All right.
Yeah. So.
No sound effect.
Let me hear you the horn. Yeah. All right, there we go. So, all right, so let's move to, and this is something that you've brought up a couple of times, Dan, and I do have a lot of interest in it, and it's the districts versus conferences discussion. Now, I know this came up maybe last year for a vote at the IHSA. It didn't get voted in, but the concept of creating districts versus conferences and creating 8 different classes within each district and 8 teams within those different classifications, I think is interesting, right? Because you would group teams together that are of like size, of like talent, and maybe it makes for more competitive when it gets time for the playoffs. When you think about the conferences and you think about, let's just think about the Chicago Catholic League. You've got 24 schools. Is that what it is? Yeah. 24 different schools, all different sizes, playing different levels, but they've got to play these teams. For example, a team that might be an 8A like Loyola, and you've got a team like just say Leo or De La Salle, who's got to travel and play Loyola at some point. It just doesn't seem like maybe that works out the best way it could. Now, there's some drawbacks to districts versus conferences, and I think the main drawback, and you're probably going to talk about this, is the distance. How do you create these districts where you've got 8 teams within a certain area that are all of the same size and not have to travel 250 miles to play a game? So I think the discussion is ongoing. As a matter of fact, I know it is ongoing. But I'm not sure if this is something, districts versus conferences, is something that most of the schools within Illinois will bite off on at some point.
Joe, I'm going to push back a little bit. I think the exact opposite.
All right, good.
I think the Chicago Catholic League is probably why this gets voted down every year.
Yeah,
because I don't know if you've looked at some of the proposed districts and the breakdowns within.
Yeah,
I mean, you think there's a Catholic versus or private versus public debate now. You see some of those breakdowns, and you watch St. Ignatius roll through their conference year after year after year, based on who they're with, or St. Rita, or some of these others. It would be, now, depending on how many make the playoffs, it might not be a big deal. But it certainly wouldn't provide the competition that the Catholic League provides on a week in and week out basis. I think the only travel issues are with some of the south suburb ones that you'd fold in some of the St. Louis area ones.
Right.
Which is rough. That's 4 hours, like 2 Fridays in a row or every other Friday would be really rough for some of these schools. But it could make sense in most places. But again, I think if people think that private schools dominate now, just go to some of these districts and watch what happens. And,
blah, 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 blah.
It seems to only happen to me. I like it. It. That's good.
No, and I am on both sides of the fence with that one, Dan. I really am. I
think some of the suburb teams really like it. I think the suburb, even the suburb Catholic League teams would really like it. It's a city one where it gets a little touchy.
A little dicey.
Dicey.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So you tell me, Dan, what CCL team, Chicago Catholic League team, do you think is most likely to repeat as a state champion next year?
Joe, I rated them.
All right.
So, yeah. So my highest rated one is Montini. I think Israel Abrams, Isaac Alexander, Nico Castaldo, transferred Damasio Ortegon. That's a really good start on offense. Defense has some guys already in place like Santino Tenuta. I'm glad we've got a Santino there still at Montini that I can cheer for.
We need Santino.
Yeah, yes, I really want to change my name. Anyway, yeah. But I think they have the best chance. I think next might be Nazareth. Again, some of these might bump up. I don't. You're going to know that better than I do, Joe.
I am.
Who goes
I
what
have got
class?
this nailed.
Yeah,
Yes.
where
No.
Nazareth will be, and really it comes down to East St. Louis. Where's East St. Louis going to be?
Right.
That's going to be a big factor. So next on my list was Nazareth, and they were at a 5 out of 10. Montini was at a 7 out of 10. The rest, I've got Mount Carmel at a 6. And they're going to be really good. They just might look a little different. So they were, Jack Elliott, they used him as much as they possibly could. They've got a 6. And then I've got DePaul Prep and Loyola at 2s. I think they just have to replace so much production. And I think that's going to be really challenging. I think they're both going to be successful. And DePaul Prep, it's going to depend. Are they 7A? Are they 8A next year? So that's the classes of where they're at is really, really dependent on how they're going to be. What do you got?
Well, I think it's a trick question, honestly, because of what you just said. And I didn't realize that. You and I talked about some of these topics, and as I delved into this one a little bit more, I thought, this is a trick question. How do you answer this? Because, you've got Mount Carmel, who most likely bumps up to 8A for next year. So because of the success factor. So they've won state championship 2 years in a row. That means they've got to bump up a class. So they're going up to 8A. That's a different animal, as you and I know. You've got Naz, who's won 2 state championships in a row at 5A. They're going to bump up to 6A because of the success factor. You've got DePaul Prep, who, is going to, I think they're going to bump up 2 classes, just because of their enrollment
size. Yeah.
Yes. And that's primarily because of the multiplier. They only won 1 state championship, and that was this year. So that won't matter. So it's really, it's kind of a tough call for me.
Montini will bump up too, won't they, Joe?
No,
I think semifinal and final though.
You know what? For the success factor to kick in football, you have to win 2 in a row state championships.
You don't just have to be in the finals?
No, I don't think so. I know we're going to make you look it up.
I'm not looking it up. We're going to make our listeners look it up.
Yeah. So then you've got Montini, right? But they've lost. I agree with you on their offensive side. I think they're going to pick up right where they left off, but they lost a huge amount of players on their defense. Which really drove a lot of their success this year was on the defensive side of the ball. So all that said, Loyola lost a bunch too, and I have to look at quarterbacks and, all the top quarterbacks for each of these teams, except for Montini, are all gone. So having to replace that is going to be really difficult.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
They might look different. They might be
Yeah, they might look different. But I'm actually going to pick Mount Carmel.
Okay. Yeah, I've got Montini as who my pick most likely.
All right. Well, that's good. All right. So let's go to one of our favorite topics, and this is the recent rule, and maybe you can explain this a little bit more. But moving from 25 to 20 days, the amount of days during the summer are those contact? You can have contact?
Contact.
Okay.
Which means you can get in pads, not like contact, like I see you, we have contact. So it doesn't affect the weightlifting and running. It affects contact days where you can put helmets and shoulder pads on and run plays and do individual drills.
Helmet and shoulder pads, or is it, do you have to have your pants on?
No, nope, just helmet and shoulder pads. Helmet and shoulder pads.
No wonder why they're reducing the number of days.
Yeah, really. So 25 to 20 days, Joe. And it's funny, we talk a lot about the summer, which was a topic we didn't really see coming until we started talking to coaches. And I knew there were issues regarding competition with travel leagues and other sports, but it's a pretty layered discussion when we brought it up with coaches last summer. And if I'm a coach, I don't mind this. I believe summer. I used to argue with our coaching staff and think that we weren't getting everything out of the summer that we could. I felt like rather than installing everything and being in a rush to have everything installed, so you could go right into August camp, practicing. I still feel like it should be all about fundamentals. For me, my bigger picture thoughts are that you should go back to lifting and running as a primary goal, with some 7-on-7 team building events thrown in. I used to fight for position group practices. So if I was the O-line coach, just give me my O-lineman and we will do fundamental drills for an hour and let them go. And if you want to have mini camps like the NFL does at the end of June or the beginning of July or mid-July, have a mini camp where you can then do some of the team stuff to see how it all fits together. But I would love to organize a summer where we focused on fundamentals within our position groups. Yes, some kids would have to go to more than one, but that's how I'd like to see summer goes. I think this is a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know. From my perspective, I'm wondering how much of a difference this really makes. Now, I can see, I guess what it would do is it would make the coaches be a little bit more strategic about how they're handling their number of practices over the summer. So I think from that perspective, it's a good thing.
Yeah.
But honestly, I do see where there might be some competitive balance that plays into this too. You've got some of the bigger programs, well-funded programs, whatever you want to say, who, could take full advantage of 25 days of doing this. And then you've got some other programs that might not be able to do that, right, for one reason or another. So I could see how maybe it kind of levels the playing field a little bit, but I'm just not sure that it makes all that much of a difference. I mean, there's some other kind of things around the fringes, like letting kids, be multi-sport athletes and do what they want to do, right, over the summer. So I get all of that, but I also think it's only 5. So how big of a difference is that really going to make?
Yeah. If I were a coach, I'd schedule Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday morning, maybe, and then say, baseball players, you can get there.
Yes, I agree. Yeah. And yeah, I think, I think you've got to be more flexible in the summer as a coach, especially as a football coach, knowing everything else that's going on. Right. So, anyways, okay. So let's talk about the evolution of the game of football at the high school level, Dan. And, this, you being a more, having more coaching experience than I have in football, you might have some better things to talk about here, but when I see this and I try and look at it, or I looked at it in a little bit more of a wider sense, a bigger picture sense. And one of the things that it came down to for me is the way the offenses are evolving as well as the defenses. You're going to see more and more of what I call hybrid type players, right? I saw the term positionless, and I think that applies, right, to the way the offenses are evolving with the spread, moving people out. Less of a run game, so to speak. You don't really need. From a defensive standpoint, you don't need those big kind of huge stout guys, in the middle of your defense. You need guys who are tweeners, who can run, who are fairly big in size, and can get out to the edges, and you can use them in multiple different spots on the field. And that goes to the same on offense as well. When I look about and we talk about how some of the things from the professional level and college level are starting to push down to the high school level, you look at some of the players that are really kind of hybrids on offense as well. Guys who can run the ball, guys who are receivers as well, guys who can block, guys who can return kicks, whatever it might be. But, I think from my standpoint of looking at it maybe one step up, I see more of an evolution from that standpoint as far as the types of players that are going to fit into the offenses that are being run now and the defenses that are going to have to be run in order to stop those offenses.
All right. So I think this is a great but a challenging topic to discuss. When I was coaching, I always thought that teams that were 80-20 run to pass, running 80% of the time, they would go away. But they have it in some areas, and they've had a ton of success. And I thought it might be difficult to get high-level quarterbacks or wide receivers. But, Joe, if you've got 4 or 5 massive offensive linemen and big guys that can get a lot of touches and you win a ton of football games, that's probably going to take precedence over any type of scheme you're going to run. You're going to get players that fit your scheme. So I think offensively, while we see in the Catholic League a lot more throw it around and great quarterbacks, there's still a place for those big rough and tumble teams. And defensively, the NFL, Joe, has almost gone to exclusively a 4-2-5. They might call it a 4-3, but that third linebacker is really a cornerback or safety type.
Yeah.
I think defensively it opens a door for having essentially 12 starters versus 11, because you have those hybrid type of players. Justin Buckner at St. Rita is a great example of that. A guy who could cover in the pass, but was really physical in the running game.
Jack Paris.
Yeah, right? Another guy. Yep. That could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we might see more of that type of player on defense. And Joe, it wouldn't surprise me, Joe, if you see some of the things in 4 or 5 years. We've talked about how the punting game, there's a coach out there who said, I never punt, and he was kind of ridiculed. Now nobody punts, or people punt, half as much as they used to. Yep. I think you might see some of these weird formations. If you look up the A11 and see the formations that they're running, it's really weird. 3 linemen, guys spread out, linemen out there. You are going to see some of that, I think, mark my words, in 5 years. And the chess game is going to continue. The one thing, Joe, that's the X factor, quarterbacks who can run. Really tough to defend no matter what. So
is that part of the evolution, Dan? Quarterbacks who can run?
I feel like it's been around forever. That was something that you didn't account for as a defensive coach, and it was really difficult. Now you could do spies and that, but you're going to have a nose guard spy the quarterback. Even linebackers, it's tough. You're one-on-one open space. That's a challenge, and it changes what you're going to do defensively. And I think you're just going to see some of these things evolve, and continue to evolve, where you go big, focused on run versus, once the defenses go smaller, you say, all right, I'm going to get a bunch of big guys, and we're going to pound the football, get a fullback in there and see what we can do. And it's just going to kind of go back and forth.
Yeah, and no matter how it evolves, you're always going to have those teams that you just mentioned. And what comes to mind, or what team comes to mind for me, that's Joliet Catholic.
Sure. Right? Yep, that's who I thought of too.
Look at how they won this year, and how they've won, how many years, over the course of, the last, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, they've got the data to back it up. State championship,
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. What I was thinking about, Dan, is all of these topics that we picked, we could probably do a whole episode on each of them.
Yeah.
Rather than 4 minutes.
Yeah.
It really is. But we are down to our last topic.
Are we really?
We are. Yeah. And we are down to transfers. no limit transfers.
Ooh.
Something we've talked about a little bit over the past couple of episodes. We talked about it with Dr. Niehoff from NFHS. Talked about it with Dr. Scott Grant in our NIL episode, how transfers kind of work into that. And you and I see it, every week, because we follow some of this information. We see, what transfers are doing or what's happening in the state of Illinois from a standpoint of players that are transferring. So, whether it's good or bad, there's two schools of thought on this. You try and limit it, you try and regulate it, you try and hold it back as much as you can, or you just go all in like the state of Florida has done. And I've seen it likened to the Wild Wild West. The state of Florida and some other states are kind of going in that direction, like California, Arizona, I think Texas, maybe Georgia as well. They're starting to let there be, I'll just say unlimited transfers of some of the student athletes within high school. And the jury's still out as to what this is going to mean for high school sports and whether or not this is going to be a good thing or bad thing. But, I think from a standpoint of when you take into account money, and I know it always kind of comes down to money, unfortunately, and really people don't want to talk about that at the high school level, but it does. You're talking about scholarships that are worth, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the course of 4 years, 5 years, whatever. You're talking about NIL money. So there is a lot that goes into this as far as high school level and letting kids transfer because they want to transfer to give themselves a better opportunity, whether it be for a scholarship, whether it be for NIL money, whatever it might be. And I'm not sure there's going to be a way that you're going to be able to limit this going forward. I know a lot of states are going to try it, and Illinois may be one of them, but there's already kids getting around the whatever the transfer rules might be in a particular state, including Illinois. So I'm not sure how you're going to stop this. This is like NIL. I think this is like a train on the tracks, and it is almost up to full speed now. And we'll see how this goes going forward.
Yeah, Joe, this one tears at me in a lot of ways. It's just so foreign to me to think of being in a great school with guys that have become lifelong friends. I recently had dinner, and I graduated 35 years ago, and had dinner with 6 teammates, and we talked about games, that we played together, and just how those lifelong friendships are forged in those times. And to think of people leaving for greener pastures, it mimics the travel sports culture. Is where we both experience team hoppers, that we're on one team every year, and boy, but it seems harder in high school to for me anyway, to leave those buddies that I've made, those guys that I want to win with and win for. It really that seems like something that doesn't feel right. The other hand is, should you be free to choose? And should there be real rules around what happens when you make that choice? And currently I think there's a lot of games being played by adults, in the transfer eligibility game, and which
Right.
seems a little sleazy to me. But I hate the idea how this plays out, where there could be teams of, mercenaries, so to speak, that just so they can raise a trophy at the end of the year. It just wouldn't feel as pure. And I think the high school game would be diminished, and it screams Champions League to me, so you could still, I think it's the best of both worlds there, by the way, to get my little playoff structure note in there.
Right.
And thoughts, but yeah, I get it, but it would bum me out.
Yeah, it would bum me out too.
Yeah.
And it actually bums me out already.
Yeah.
Because not that I think, especially in the state of Illinois, that I think, things are over the top and, they've got to rein this in, whatever this might be, but just because I can kind of see the handwriting on the wall.
Yeah.
And there's going to be some changes that, I don't know how far away they are, but I don't think they're all that far away. But you mentioned travel or club teams, whether it's something like that, where all of a sudden you're creating, a bunch of super teams, in a particular state,
Yep.
How do they compete with a typical high school team, or do they even compete with a typical high school team? The handwriting on the wall, and you and I have mentioned this a couple of times, I don't want to see the game of high school football go the same way that college football has gone.
Yeah.
I really don't. I
Yeah.
just think there should be a difference there.
Yeah, I know it can take us back to the whole private, public thing.
Yeah.
Is it already happening in some way, shape, or form? There's people would argue that it is. It takes us back to the district versus conference thing, and you want to talk. People don't care about travel anymore.
No,
they
do
drive
not.
They drive hundreds of miles for travel events, where there might be a college coach at, and so yeah, there's a lot of layers to it, but yeah, I do see it, Joe, as a train that you can't stop, but it doesn't make me happy about it.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see what these other states do. We know what some of them are doing, like I mentioned, Florida, where they just let it happen. And there's a lot of states, like Dr. Niehoff said, looking over the fence, at Florida and saying,
Yeah.
let's see how this goes, and if it's going to affect us, or what we're going to be able to do, either to counteract it, or are we going to jump on board?
So, Joe, could you in Florida theoretically play football at one school, basketball at another, and baseball at a third?
I believe so. All in one school year.
Come on.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Or
but
run track or whatever it might be. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But the other thing that plays into this, Dan, and a couple people that we've talked to have alluded to this, is that when you tell someone no, you end up in the courts, or
Yep.
these state associations end up in the courts, and they don't have, really deep pockets.
Right.
So, it's really tough. It's like every time they're going to tell somebody no, they're going to end up in court. So
right.
they're going to have to try and figure out a way to accommodate it, limit it, put rules around it, whatever it might be. But I just think there's no way you stop it.
Yeah. Yep. So there has to be some precedent set. So ring the bell.
Ring the bell. How about this
blah,
one?
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
All right. Well, that is it, Dan, for our first quick hits episode. We hope everybody enjoyed it. We've got so many topics that you and I can cover and talk about, and we will. We'll be doing more of these episodes over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 months or so. So make sure you come back and you listen. And we appreciate you listening. Make sure you like, follow, subscribe wherever you're listening from. We appreciate that as well. And
reach out, give us players, give us futures.
Players. Yeah, don't feel shy about reaching out to us on social media. We're out there, so you can find us. All right, so thank you everybody for listening, and we will talk with you soon.